Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics, where we're very excited this week to have one of our things our viewers enjoy, which is a full panel for the full half hour. And this half hour will be joined by Jane Dueker, Government Affairs Attorney Extraordinaire. Jane, thanks for coming back on.
Yep, happy to be here.
It's one of the first times you've ever been on when you didn't just win some big legal case, so
right,
maybe you won't be as gloating as normal.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Mindy Mazur back with us again. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Linda Rallo, first time on. We're very glad to have you on this week. We have a very topical thing to discuss later in the show about Raise Your Hand for Kids, right?
Yeah, we're really excited. Campaign's going well, and I can't wait to give you all the details.
And one of the people we've invited on many times, and glad to finally have you booked, Representative Zerr from St. Charles County. Thank you so much for being on.
I appreciate it. I'm glad this worked out.
And let's start with the biggest topic of the week in the legislature. Very seldom in the past these national issues intersect with state issues, but more and more national issues are becoming state political issues, and never more than with the Syrian refugee issue. The president said after Paris what he called a small setback, he would still be welcoming in tens of thousands of Syrian refugees. Most of the governors have said, please not here, we're not taking them. Jay Nixon has said he's okay with it. The legislature has come out, how many of your colleagues? Many have said, we need to stop and do a pause. Even Chris Koster stepped forward and said, we need to pause this. What is your position, and where do you see this issue going?
I think that, many of my colleagues have come out and just summarily said, no, let's not let them in. It's too much of a danger. Personally, should we vet them, the Syrian refugees, any more or any less than any other refugee? No. These are tense times. These are, given the Paris incident and some Syrian refugees going to other countries, are Germany's taking tens of thousands. I think they'll be vetted properly. The governor has said that it is the Department of Homeland Security's and the federal government's job to vet them. Should we rush to do this? Well, no. We have to make sure that they're properly vetted, as is every refugee.
Sure.
But if we look at it, there are many steps for refugees to be approved to get into any given state.
And you signed on to the speaker's letter, which was saying we should really take some time with this, right?
Yeah, he said, he addressed the problem, he acknowledged the problem, and he asked the governor, please, the safety of Missouri citizens is of utmost importance to us. Make sure that we're taken care of, that Missouri is protected, and asked him, what are your plans?
Jane Dueker, why is it America's responsibility to take in Syrian refugees? How does this help us, and isn't it dangerous?
Well, I think everyone agrees that safety is of utmost importance. But this issue has existed as long as we've been a country. I mean, we are a country made up of people who came from other places.
Wasn't every country except, one spot where the first people were?
Well, but I also think that taking on, immigration, all ties into that. We can increase our economy, increase the base that we have in America if we do this safely, and we do it. And I think everybody agrees with that. And I think you have bipartisan agreement that we have to be careful. But that doesn't mean no. And it doesn't mean that our country doesn't benefit from the influx of new people, new Americans, bigger economy.
Boy, isn't Jay Nixon taking a risk here? I mean, if he says, let's take in Syrian refugees, as the people in France did, and there's an incident like in France, isn't he putting a great deal of his legacy and Missourians' lives, basically entrusting them to a federal administration that's not thought of as the most competent?
Well, but we have risk now. I mean, we have people, they're trying to radicalize people within our country now. And so, I mean, we need to step up our intelligence and step up all of our oversight no matter what.
Who do you mean?
The federal government needs to take care of it.
They are radicalizing. Who is they?
Oh, ISIS?
Mindy Mazur, why does Hillary Clinton seem to have a problem saying these are radical Islamic terrorists? Why is that a problem for the president or Hillary Clinton to say?
Well, I think if you look at the rhetoric and you get into the semantics of the way people are talking about it, even George W. Bush, when he was president, didn't exactly use the right terminology or whatever with regard to isolating a certain religion. And I think that's what folks don't want to do, because that really kind of plays into the hands of the terrorists. If we use a broad brush to
doesn't accepting refugees in some ways play into the hands of the terrorists?
Well,
I think not accepting.
It
does.
Yeah, I think there's an argument for that, but the bottom line is that this type of an incident, what happened in Paris was horrible, right? I mean, it's absolutely horrible, and it's a time when it really draws into people's fears, and it's a time where our leaders should be working together to find out reasonable solutions to help continue to keep our country safe, and not this kind of demagoguery that we see, frankly, some of the state legislators who are out there acting like they're foreign policy experts, but the fact of the matter is folks like Mike Moon, up until about 12 months ago, probably didn't realize that Syria wasn't the nice lady in his iPhone to whom he asked directions. I mean, let's be serious about this.
Linda Rallo, well, I mean, you may have a point. At some point, don't we have to take, when radical Islamists say death to America, when do we take them at their word and assume they mean it?
Well, I think we've seen that in the past, that they mean it, and I think we have to take it seriously. But I think as this issue, you have to kind of think about families and children. And I think seeing a boy washed up on the shore of a foreign country that's just trying to find freedom, and we're going to put up a wall and say no, I think you have to think about those families. And I think there's processes to vet these refugees. And we have to we don't want to look back on our history and say that we just ignored a problem, because we've seen it in the past where, bad atrocities happen. And we want to be a leader on freedom. We've got to look at that.
Are you ignoring the problem when the president calls what happened in Paris a setback? That doesn't seem like a setback to me.
A setback?
The president called what happened in Paris a setback. Seemed like a little bit more than a setback.
I wouldn't say it's a setback. I think it helps you further identify what's really happening and how these groups are coming into countries, and they're setting up new ways. I mean, I found out yesterday that the way that they communicate was through fantasy football. We need to figure out how they're getting their cells activated and how they're doing what they're doing. And so I wouldn't say a setback, but a kind of a wake-up call.
Quick predictions here to wrap this up, does Nixon stick with Obama on this?
I can't speak for the governor. I have no idea what he would do.
Will there be Syrian refugees relocated into Missouri?
Over a period of time, but it's going to be slow, and it needs to be slow. Especially, we need to be hyper vigilant right now.
Do you think, will there be Syrian refugees leaving Syria, living in Missouri?
That certainly, at some point, I think there probably will be.
Jane, will there be?
Yes, and we had the same issue with the Bosnians, and they make up an incredible community.
As an attorney, let me ask you one quick question: can a governor stop it?
No. That's that's the state issues on this, the discussion about it. It's a federal government issue. They're going to decide whether they come into the border. If a private agency in St. Louis or Missouri wants to take these people, they can. And if they're federally approved, that's going to happen. So I think the discussion about what states can do is it's political.
Well, if a person were to move into, be resettled in New York or New Jersey or Pennsylvania, they could drive to Missouri.
Absolutely.
With there's no border guards at the Indiana state line.
Once you're in our country, you're protected. If you're in here legally.
States can't refuse them from state to state, can
That's
they?
exactly right.
Right.
Well, let's talk about, Jane, while we're on the subject, something states do to their own citizens. SB 5 was passed by Senator Schmidt on a bipartisan effort, signed into law by the governor. It was a very interesting piece of law where so many folks were together on one topic. And what we're going to do is, there was a lawsuit filed by some of these greedy municipalities. And when we come back from the break, I'd like to start with you and talking about what the impact is and are they successful? And we'll get to that right after our leading economic indicators on This Week in Missouri Politics.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Back to This Week in Missouri Politics, and Jane, the Empire Strike Back. The North County municipalities, they want their money. By God, they're going to get it. Doesn't matter what the state law is. They sued. Do they win?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting the group that decided to sue, because those seem to have the highest amount of revenue that's derived solely from traffic. And I think everyone agrees that there is a problem. Everyone agrees that there's, there has to be a better way to govern. The problem is, I mean, and I know that I'm going to be like the worst human on the planet, but there are some legal problems with Senate Bill 5. And so it's unfortunate if, that's what's going to lead to, maybe slowing this effort down. I've always been a proponent. I think that, one, there's a Hancock problem. I mean, I do think that pushing things down on municipalities requiring...
Yeah, we all believe John Hancock's a problem.
And so there you go.
What do you mean by
the Hancock problem? It's called unfunded mandates, and it means that you cannot tell municipalities to do things without funding it. And that was part of the Hancock Amendment that's basically ruined our state. And so, we have that issue. And then there's a constitutional issue that allows municipalities to keep their fines. We've been traditionally a local control state. I've always been a proponent of pass a bill that says if you don't meet these qualifications, you don't get to be a municipality. That simple.
Cut that government.
We are, I mean, we're nipping around the edges, because now we're hearing that you're going to get cited for not cutting your grass, for not,
Representatives there, though, is this where the legislature steps in? If the courts find a way to get rid of this bill, do they come back and instead of 10% make it 8 or hopefully 7 or 5?
We could tell them they can't be municipalities anymore, too.
What a wonderful idea.
Could it be argued that the unfunded mandates, if you will, are basic minimum standards that should be expected of any municipality? Could that be an argument?
It could be, and that's the risk, is that the difference in saying here's what you need to be a municipality, saying you will now provide, and the fact that you're not setting standards statewide, that could, say, well, this is more of a mandate.
We're very lucky to have an alderwoman from Town and Country, and Linda Rallo. Linda, good Lord, can this be stopped? Is there not a way the government can protect its citizens from the government?
Well, cities are a creature of the state, and so we really do look to the state to kind of give us certain guidelines. And I think, in our city, when that Senate Bill 5 passed, we had to take a hard look at it. We've got 500,000 cars that come through Town and Country every day, and we need, especially, DWIs. We do a lot of DWI work, and we're stopping people that are in the city driving to, say, Wildwood or St. Charles County, and stopping them, and we're actually probably preventing deaths down the road. But I think, so government has a very strong role in keeping people safe, and I think that when you look at Senate
But these are parasite cities.
I'm not arguing
something
that.
To do with safety.
What I'm saying is, you cut their revenue, and
Bless
then
the Lord.
and then we just have to make sure, what are we going to replace that revenue with, so we keep those citizens safe.
What do the citizens replace that revenue with?
Well, that's the big question.
Mindy Mazur, are you running the risk of taking some good, liberal North County people and turning them into conservative, government-cutting Republicans? Are we taking some Butler County values and putting them in North County?
That's a little bit of a loaded question, I think. But no, I think you have to get back to why was this passed? And I think part of the intent of this was to make sure that we stop allowing people to be targeted and and to be getting ticket revenue as a main part of the municipality's revenue. And it's targeting citizens. And it's something that feeds into a much larger issue that we're dealing with as Missourians, and particularly in the St. Louis area. And I think that, I'm not a lawyer like Jane is, so it'll be interesting to see how the court fight sort of plays out, if there really are issues.
More than Jane.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm just a simple hillbilly from West Butler County, but I just have a hard time understanding why you could call something a city if all it is a parasite off the poor people who have to drive through there. If there wasn't a state highway through some of these places, they wouldn't be able to do this because no one would go there. Is there not a state role to say you got to stop?
Yes. I mean, I think that's
what they're
everybody
trying to
agrees.
do.
Yeah, and I think everybody agrees on that problem.
Maybe the best public
how
policy.
you address it, the details, and it's always the details. This isn't an issue of, you want everybody to be taxed, by citation. No one agrees with that. It's just a matter of, can we do this in a way that gets to the goal we want, which is thriving municipalities need to be able to have their local control. You need to have municipalities that are targeting their citizens and not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and have them reined in or eliminated. And it's a harder question, but have the courage to say, if you don't meet these standards, you're gone.
Well, what's wrong with the citizens of the municipality now that they can't leech off the rest of the state? They have to go to their citizens and say, we provide these services that cost this much. If you want these services, you have to raise your local taxes. And what I think they found enforced, though, was they didn't want the services. They wanted their own money to be left alone.
Yeah, they do. They do. They want to be little islands, and I absolutely agree with that. But that's not right, and that those municipalities don't have the revenue. They don't generate the revenue. They can't tax more. They have to do this predatory action, they feel. But you know, another problem that the cities had with it, that were the 12%, 12.5% versus the 20% throughout the state. But we do that all the time. What about state TIFs? What about the pool tax in
Could
St.
it be that
Louis?
the government just does too much stuff all the time?
Well, sure it does. But if if they want to make the argument that they're at 12.5%, limited at 12.5%, and others are at 20%, there's a lot to support that they were abusing it, that they all across the state, we make different levels and different rules for different municipalities. So I don't think that that's an argument that they
I agree.
can
I
have.
think the special law argument being treated differently is not going to fly.
Yeah.
I mean, we do make distinctions all the time within the types of municipalities. I don't think that argument is very good. I think what comes into it is what you mentioned is the police power. Can you put a cap on police power? And, and that, so it's all in the details as to whether this works. Now, do I think that we have bipartisan left-right agreement on a problem we're trying to address, which I think is a great thing. It doesn't happen that often, and we need to seize the opportunity to do it. So if there's some legal problems on it, okay, great. I worked on the last Max Creek bill, went to Senator Schmidt, said, here are your legal problems, was going through the courts, and those things were fixed. And so, this is a back and forth, and I think we don't need to say this is, all right or wrong. It's okay, here's the goal. If this implementation doesn't work, let's find another way to achieve the goal and keep working on it.
I just think everyone's missing the really big point here. And it is why do they have a revenue problem? And go to those communities and look for businesses that are thriving and look at kids and see who's doing well.
Maybe they
and
have a
who's
spending
not.
problem.
No, I don't think they have a spending problem. I think you have areas where there's just no tax base.
Right.
No resident tax base. And until we really lift the lid and address those critical underlying problems, it doesn't matter all these other things that we do. Like you said, exactly, we're just nipping around the edge and we're forgetting to face the big problem. We have unaccredited schools, we have people that don't have jobs, we have no place for commerce in these communities, and there's no tax revenue.
I think that's right. There's a larger context here, and this is a narrow issue, which is just one piece of it, and you could have a whole other spin-off show just on those issues alone.
Let's talk about something we've talked about here a lot, which is the University of Missouri.
Yes.
They seem to be making some pretty positive steps. There'll be more there was new blood announced. Governor Nixon put a new curator from St. Louis on. Ann Covington, longtime Mizzou, Senate President a lot with Mizzou, has stepped aside. Mike Middleton seems to be doing all the right things out of the gate.
Yes, well, I think that, the last couple of weeks with the University of Missouri have been really sort of, almost could be a watershed moment perhaps as we look back. It's gonna be interesting to see how it all plays out over time. I think it's a real challenge for folks, and it's going to be a leadership challenge on a continued basis there. There are a few things that I think are important to keep in mind, and as somebody who's still, I still have a relationship with the university through some different organizations, and so I know a lot of both students and also people who work with the university. And I think that now that sort of everything's kind of blown up and there have been some of those big changes, that there's a real opportunity for the university to open up, to listen, to make progressive strides, and actually become a leader in a way that they weren't otherwise nationally. I think it's a real opportunity for leadership. Are we going to get there by, the end of the semester? No.
Sure.
This is going to be kind of a long time thing, and it's really going to require some sophisticated learning and listening by the part of the new administration that's in place. And also, I think, some of the things that they're doing now are a little, last night they sent out an email to folks about a listening session today with the curators. This afternoon for organizational leaders. I don't know if anybody else saw it. I got a copy forwarded to me. That's a good thing. They should do that. They should allow that time for that conversation. But at the same time, it went out last night, and it's the Friday before Thanksgiving break. So some of the process matters here.
Trying. I mean,
some of the process
Jane,
matters.
I think the governor deserves some credit here. he started last session by putting on two people that think differently, David Stillman, Marcy Graham. He's followed up with another appointment. He'll have another appointment out of the 4th Congressional District. Isn't the ship beginning to turn? And people love to criticize the governor. The Syrian issue was a good example of that, but maybe the governor started some leadership changes that needed to take place.
And yes, and I think it takes time, but I think even traditionally, even when I worked in the governor's office, more than a decade ago, there's always been sort of this higher ed tenure.
Sure.
And so, and I think this is emblematic of a larger problem. I think leadership is enormous. Figuring out how to listen to people and have a better sort of, dialogue and a better understanding of the world around you. I think they're a little isolated. I think this is a problem with higher ed everywhere. And so being able to sort of get out into the community and understand better what's going on both sides. I mean, we're seeing a lot of people taking sides, and a university never wins in taking sides. It needs to get to the point where you no longer have to have sides, and that requires a lot more in the community and just a better understanding of who you're governing. And I think this is a wake-up call, and I hope that these new appointments, which I think will be helpful, will get to that point. And don't be afraid of it, because getting ahead of this is a lot easier than trying to clean up afterwards when there's been a communication breakdown.
That may be the lasting lesson to take from it. But Representative Zerr, she mentioned knowing who you're governing. Part of who you governs the University of Missouri system. You seem to have a partner you can work with in Mike Middleton. Is he somebody you look forward to engaging and moving forward?
Yeah, I do. Everything I've read about him, I haven't met him, but everything I've read about him, people are very hopeful about the dialogue, and there was a big shakeup. But let's look at more globally as well. I think that this is probably indicative of that struggle that the Midwest has had for so long about the race issue. And it's a microcosm example. And, I don't want to tie this with Ferguson, but I always say the grapes of wrath. This is like the grapes of wrath. People are very tired of being second-class citizens and being treated as second-class citizens, or perceived that they're second-class citizens, and they're devalued. So I see this as one more step in that big discussion of race in our state, because we're that goofy Missouri, compromise, Missouri compromise. So this is one, I just see this as one more positive step in the discussion, because we don't know how to talk about it. We really don't.
Yeah. Linda, you have been very active in education issues at different times. You've had a ballot initiative that you're spearheading that was sort of in, I don't know what I would say competition, but it's certainly your issue now is brought to the fore. The university seems to have some other priorities. Tell us a little bit about Raise Your Hand for Kids and what you'll be doing going in the next few months leading into session.
Well, Raise Your Hand for Kids is an organization that's pursuing a tobacco tax increase. We're looking to get on the November 2016 ballot. And we've been working on this for almost 2 years. We spent all of last year kind of going around the state. We did community conversations in 11 different cities in Missouri, and we invited community leaders, education leaders, health experts to kind of come and talk about, if we could bring you this pot of money to spend on kids birth to 5, how would you want to use it? And kind of just listen to what they had. And what we really found out is across the state, the needs were different. Columbia has great pre-K. They just had trouble getting kids to the seats. And Poplar Bluff, they have excellent pre-K, but not enough seats. They just want to extend their capacity. So we wanted to design a policy that would kind of work in all parts of Missouri. We didn't want it to be a St. Louis, Kansas City thing or a rural urban thing, just something that would work. And so after doing all of that work going around the state, then we developed the policy, and so we are hoping to start collecting signatures early next year.
Those tobacco taxes have been getting closer and closer. Do you think yours is the one that gets over the top?
I agree. I think that 16 is the right year to do it. You're going to have a open seat presidential, open seat gubernatorial, so turnout is going to be as high it can be, and that really will, I think, tip the scales in our favor.
Speaking of that open seat, Mindy, talking about the presidential race for a second, Democrat debate was interesting. Right after the Paris attacks, they worked on changing the format. Is there really a race, or is this Hillary Clinton's coronation?
Well, I think there was no doubt, and there hasn't been some doubt, I think, ever since the debate started in general, but that one really solidified her place as the front runner. I mean, there's just no question. There's no real competition, and there's no one.
Larry David might be competition. he may be the best.
He's great. He is. I am a Larry David fan. You know, her credentials, she's just so strong on foreign policy. You're not going to get anybody on either side of the aisle that has her kind of credentials there. And if you look at the Republican clown car of candidates right now, I think, you know, it's
Well,
sorry,
hey,
Representative.
Well, I would ask you, she's never signed the front of a paycheck, right?
What do you
Like
mean by
Donald
that?
Trump has. I mean, he's a
Wow.
businessman. I mean,
I'm going door to door for Donald.
yeah.
I've already
you
committed
are.
to that. I've already
Are
committed
we
to that.
meeting
you are.
at 8:30 or 9 Saturday? I can't remember. Jane.
Whenever time, but make America Trump
Jane,
again.
that stage is a little thin. I mean, does that worry you a little bit that you don't have a very big crowd of people in this? I mean,
You mean on the Democratic
yeah,
side? Oh
it's just
no,
one
I just
person.
think that's
and a socialist.
Good.
I actually think
We're
that
unified.
the
That's
the
good.
Republican idea that having 17 people splitting all this up and being crazy and not being able to get behind one person is challenging. I think
But really, that
I'm
stage
okay
is
with
pretty
us
thin.
being
You've got
unified.
one older guy who acknowledges being a socialist, wanting to replace a socialist. You got Hillary Clinton, who's sort of quasi. It looked a little thin there.
Yeah, and I mean, and you know, Martin O'Malley is nice, and I think he's got some great ideas, and I think that they are helpful in getting her to make sure that she is inclusive for the whole party. I'd rather be on this side of it with one front runner than.
Speaking of inclusive,
other
though,
side.
Marco Rubio's Missouri team, led by Speaker Richardson, announced a bunch of endorsements. It seems like an interesting play to say, I'm the candidate of the future, not the 90s. Hillary Clinton
Yeah.
says she's a product of the 60s. He wasn't even born.
Right.
I mean, it does maybe have a little bit bigger side.
Well, he's probably appealing to those demographics, right?
Sure.
Which, you know, I in my races, old people like me, and young people like me, and about 30 to 39 go, what? You know, so I need to work on that. But well, everybody's picking sides now, and it's fallen down. Myself, I worry about political time. I want to play out because everybody peaks at a different time.
But speaking of timing out, we're going to have to time out
Okay.
for this week's edition of This Week in Missouri Politics. And we'll be back. We'll have everyone back, I'm sure, to talk about the presidential race as we move forward. And we'll see you next week.